Social and psychological realities of bilingualism. Now, bilingualism, we have discussed before also, is social, and it at the same time it is also individual. It is individual because language is always appropriated or adjusted at an individual level. However, even when we want to study language at individual level, individuals are a part of the social group within which they use a language, and that makes it a social phenomenon. However, more often than not, when we talk about modeling of language behavior, that has been done more at individual level than at societal level. That might be because of problems in collecting data, which at societal level might be more difficult, while at individual level it might be easier to study the use of different languages at length, and that is why somehow language behavior has been modeled in psychology rather than at society level. Even when psychological theorizing is done, we need to keep in mind, as Brunner says, that individuals are nevertheless rooted in society. That would mean that their psychological state is affected by their social context. The choices that they are making is not because of certain developmental stage in their growth, but also because of the context within which they are, the person they are talking to, and how they position themselves in within a given context, and what type of identity would they like to negotiate, what kind of persona would they like to create for themselves, would determine their language choice. There are several studies looking at code switching, language choice, and how does even this language choice affects the learning of certain languages. There are lots of studies about that. In any case, we can say that language has a simultaneous existence for the individual and the social. And when we are focusing on individual use of language or languages, because we are talking about bilingualism, let me remind you, when we are focusing on the individual, we will call it bilinguality. And when we are talking about the presence of languages, more than one languages in the society, we will be calling it bilingualism. Another important thing to keep in mind that there are different dimensions of bilingualism also. And similarly, because bilingualism is not simply linguistic, and when we say we are talking about power relationships, we have discussed a number of times, then this would mean that the theoretical perspectives from which we can study bilingualism are also multiple. So, what are the different approaches or frameworks that we can use, and which one is the right framework to study bilingualism? Well, it only depends on where you are coming from, which aspects of bilingualism are you interested in, because when it comes to studying bilingualism, different theoretical frameworks actually focus on different dimensions of bilingualism. So linguistic dimension, or the social dimension, or the individual dimension, or what about the sociological dimension? What about the educational dimension? So you can study bilingualism from psychology. Look at how an individual sort of shifts between different languages. When does that code switching occur? You can study it from anthropology. How have two languages existed in the society? You can talk about languages or know about them from psycholinguistics. Again, takes you into the psychology of learning a language. Or sociolinguistics. How do languages operate in a society, and what is the impact of that on languages? So even in sociolinguistics, although we look at the interaction between language and society, the focus is more towards linguistics and not towards the people themselves. Politics, language is definitely related to power. You have Tariq Rahman's work, which is talking constantly about language and power. You can talk about education. Which languages should we use when teaching our children when we live in a multilingual context? How do certain languages or the choice of certain languages help in literacy development? You can talk about sociology, how the use of certain languages or the preference of one language over the other leads to sociological issues in which the participation of certain groups might be limited. So the frameworks through which bilingualism can be studied are multiple, and it is a choice that you will make.